Okay, Jon Jones is a heavyweight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a different kind of episode. We've done a few of these before. The one about the 162 title, and a few others that we'll keep throwing out there. This one comes off the back of the Jones and Ngannou breakdown that we did, kind of like a speculative what would happen if type of circumstance. To which some people in the comments said, "Oh, Jon Jones is never moving up to heavyweight. He's never going to fight Ngannou." Just vacated his belt and decided he's stepping up. So I am very excited to see Jon Jones at heavyweight, and I've decided that I want to talk to you about who I would like to see him fight and why. So in my list here, I have the top 15 heavyweights. There are some people that I'm not that interested to see. Obviously, if Jon Jones is fighting the likes of JDS or Alexander Volkov or whoever, I will definitely watch the fights because I think they'll be fascinating. There are some people in this division that are far more deserving of a shot against Jon Jones. And I know that's a weird thing to say, but getting a shot at Stipe and the belt is one thing. Getting a shot at Jon Jones as a heavyweight is another. Stipe will get you the belt around your waist if you win him. It'll get a lot of attention to you as a UFC champion. A win over Jon Jones is a very different thing entirely. Jon Jones stepping up to heavyweight, what's going to change about his game? I don't think a great deal. He's going to be slightly heavier, but I don't think that's going to change too much about the way he moves because he's always been a guy that cuts weight anyway. I think he's going to be very strong and powerful at this weight class. I don't think he's going to have to worry too much about what he's doing in training camp aside from training. I don't think he's the kind of person that overeats massively. I don't think he's going to gain any unnecessary weight. He just doesn't seem like that kind of individual. You also look at his frame and you think to yourself, there's easily places where we could pack some muscle on this and it would still make him, it would make him faster for a start. He's got some long skinny legs. There's some room on them for some meat, and there's some space on his upper body for some muscle mass as well. And I don't think it would slow him down at all. If you think about his reach and height in this division, he's still a big heavyweight. He's got the longest reach in the UFC aside from Stefan Struve. And, Struve's 7 foot tall. So Jon Jones has got the frame to carry more muscle mass. And I don't really think it's going to be too detrimental. I also don't think he's going to be really pushed to gain a lot of weight. I mean, Stipe just stepped on the scales at 233 and defended his belt. It won't surprise me if Jon Jones is walking around 235, 240 anyway to fight at light heavyweight. So you've got to think he's not that much different to Stipe. He's just defending his belt with a weight cut. So who in this division should fight Jon Jones? Obviously, we've all got our own thoughts. There's loads of good fights in this division. And the heavyweight division, I can't think of a time when it's been as exciting as this because we've got a real mix of fighters. We've got some accurate strikers. We've got some veterans. We've got some strong wrestlers. We've got some big punchers. We've got guys retiring. We've got guys rising through the ranks very quickly. So let's start at the top. The obvious one is Stipe. Why is it obvious? Because Jon Jones was the champion at light heavyweight. He's stepping up to heavyweight to face Stipe Miocic, who's the current champion. Jon Jones is a heavyweight champion. You've got loads and loads of mouth-watering fights right there. Whether he deserves a shot at the heavyweight championship or not immediately, that is up for speculation. When you've got a name like Jon Jones, you kind of deserve things that other fighters don't. That's just the reality of this. It's a promotion. It's an entertainment industry as well, and Jones is one of the best that walks the face of the planet. And if you're Stipe Miocic, I'm looking down my list of contenders and I know there's some real risks there. I mean, do I want to fight Curtis Blades and get mauled, or do I want to fight Ngannou and get my head knocked off? I think I would rather take my chances against Jon Jones, especially seeing how he was in his last couple of fights. I feel like Jones has slowed down a little bit in his movement, not necessarily because he has slowed down, but probably because he's chosen to change his style of fighting. I don't know whether that's because he's not quite as excited to fight the guys that he's been facing recently. That might be a big part of it. But certainly stepping up to heavyweight, it presents a lot of new challenges for him. The reason it's important for Jon Jones to step up to heavyweight, especially if he wants to be considered an all-time great, is because there are so many physical attributes that Jon Jones has that sets him aside from everybody else anyway. He's excellent at fighting at long range because he's got long range weapons, but he also shifts through ranges very well. He's also got wrestling and clinch work to compete with everybody in the division as well, including some of the best wrestlers that we've had in the UFC. So what we need to see Jon Jones do now is not beat people with physical attributes and skill, we need to see him use just his skill. So I want to see Jon Jones fight people that are going to challenge him in different ways. Now, I know I mentioned Volkov as someone that I'm not really that interested in seeing him fight, but that's a good example of someone that would be an interesting test, because Volkov is a long-range striker. He's a longer range striker than Jon Jones. So that would be an immediate problem that Jon has to solve by fighting Volkov. I honestly think Jon runs through most of this division, to be honest. I think there's some tough tests there, of course. But it's sort of top 5, top 6 we're looking at. So Stipe's the obvious one. It's a fight that Stipe would want as well. I think Jon is just as risky as someone like Ngannou or Blades at this stage in Stipe's career. And because Stipe's just had those battles with Cormier, it gives you a good idea of where Stipe is in comparison to Cormier, which gives you a good idea of where he is in comparison to Jones. The fact that he beat DC as well 2 times positions him slightly above DC, and I think that's another good argument of, well, come and see how you did with me. You beat DC, you got his number. If he was the heavyweight champ, then maybe it wouldn't be quite as interesting but Stipe won those fights. So I do think it is an interesting one, and I do think he has the tools to compete with Jones. He's got good wrestling, he's got long range striking. I think he's going to be a real physical test for Jon Jones in the clinch. But I'll be honest, I think there are tougher tests in the heavyweight division for Jon Jones. I think there are certain things about Stipe's style that makes it easier for Jon Jones. I think things that Daniel Cormier did well against Stipe, Jon Jones could also do. But Jones also has the long-range weapons. He also is able to hit with long-range straight punches. He's also able to chop into the legs of Stipe in ways that DC wasn't able to do. And I'll be honest, there's a meanness to the way that Jon Jones fights, which I don't really see in DC's style. DC is much more of an athlete and a competitor. Jon Jones is a fighter. Like, if he can wrench your shoulder out of its socket, or if he can, the shoulder strikes we've seen Jon Jones using a lot. The stuff that he was doing against Glover Teixeira, slicing him up with elbows on the inside, using his head position in horrible ways just to make it uncomfortable, stomps and all those kind of things. Even going back to the way that he dropped Machida against the fence, there's just a meanness to Jon Jones' style, and I think that would be an interesting test for Stipe in the clinch as well. So that's an obvious one, Stipe against Jon Jones. Of course, we'd like to see that. Ngannou against Jon Jones was the video that we did before, and I think I pretty much covered that one. Obviously, Ngannou's proven himself again since then as being one of the scariest guys that walks the face of the planet, and I don't know how Jon Jones deals with that speed and that power when it's coming at him in that size frame. I think Jon Jones at 205 can deal with someone that's got that kind of speed and power, but at heavyweight, it's a different thing entirely. When Ngannou decides he's going to move, when Ngannou decides he's going to start throwing hands, there's not much of a defense that you can do that's going to defend those punches. Jones needs to use his head movement in that fight. He would need to be smart. He would need to use his footwork. He would need to vary his weapons so he's not only boxing with Ngannou. He could learn a lot from the Stipe Ngannou fight. He could probably clinch him and work some takedowns. And Jon Jones has got lots of facets to his game. There are lots of different ways that he would be able to take these heavyweights into deeper waters. But there are physical assets to these heavyweights that Jon Jones would have to overcome in order to get it into his wheelhouse. He can't play like he did against Rashad Evans or Glover Teixeira with someone like Ngannou. You can't stand at close range and lock horns with them and start coming around the sides and hitting with elbows and stuff, because one shot from Ngannou and you back down at light heavyweight with a bad headache. I think that's a really, really tough test for anybody in this division, but Jon Jones in particular, because the way that Jones fights, he cruises to decisions against guys that he probably should be looking at stopping. And I don't know as he's got the stopping power to catch Ngannou with something clean. Miocic mauled him for 25 minutes. If Jon Jones could do that to him, I would be very, very impressed. On the flip side, we've got Curtis Blades, who's chasing at the heels of Ngannou. The reason he's interesting to me is because he's a big fighter that has got a great wrestling and pedigree as well. Blades' last weigh-in was 261. So even if Jon Jones is not cutting weight and puts on a bit of muscle mass, I'd still say there's 20 pounds on the frame of Curtis Blades that's going to be an advantage for him. And the way he fights, he's able to use that additional 20 pounds as well. If you think what he did to Overeem with that ground and pound, and that, it was so impactful that Overeem moved over to Blade's training camp to work with him. That is something else that Jon Jones might have never experienced in the UFC before. I mean, we remember when he almost snagged that armbar on Vitor Belfort, but up to that point, Vitor was in a decent position. You put Curtis Blaydes in that position to land 2 or 3 elbows, and again, he might be going back down to light heavyweight with stitches. It's a different kind of test to Ngannou, and it's a different kind of test to Stipe, but it's a tough test nevertheless. Curtis Blaydes, he's not going to get this fight because Jon Jones knows the risks. But at the same time, Curtis Blaydes knows that if he gets that opportunity, he could probably ragdoll Jon Jones pretty good against the fence and beat him up. It's Jon Jones again, overcoming physical attributes and utilising his full skill set to deal with someone that's very, very good in one certain area, which obviously is Curtis Blaydes' wrestling. Blaydes' striking's coming on as well. And, Jon Jones might not be given the same kind of respect he was at light heavyweight. Anthony Smith gave him too much respect, I felt, and I think that Jones got away with a lot in other fights as well because fighters, they give him too much respect. OSP, another good example. Fights where Jon Jones is a heavyweight, you can't cruise like that against these guys because they will take advantage of it. Okay. Cormier. I know he's retired, but he retired on a loss. So let me just give you a scenario in which Cormier might be tempted back. So Jon Jones steps into the heavyweight division, he beats Stipe, and then he calls out Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier's now already lost the heavyweight title twice. To get another opportunity to fight Jon Jones, absolutely it's risky because he knows how good Jon Jones is. But at the same time, he's got nothing else to lose at that stage of his career, and I would imagine the money for that trilogy fight would be huge. So I'm not counting out the fact that Daniel Cormier might be tempted back to fight Jon Jones at heavyweight. I also think that DC feels better as a heavyweight as well, and I think he always felt like his ability to beat Jon Jones lies at heavyweight. So he might be tempted to come back, and I would certainly enjoy watching that fight, even though I don't think it's necessarily necessary for Cormier. I'm not counting it out. Rosen strikes the next one down, 11-1 in his MMA career. The reason Rosen strikes interesting for me is because he's had 76-8 is his kickboxing record, but 64 knockouts. I mean, out of 76 wins to knock out 64 guys, that's a lot of individuals, a lot of different body shapes and sizes, a lot of different skill sets, guys that fight at range with long arms, guys that get in the clinch and want to bang hard to the body and come up the center, guys that like to fight in the clinch, guys that just like to box, guys that like to work his legs. Rosenstrike's kickboxing career has prepared him for most of the striking tools that you would expect from Jon Jones. I say most because there are going to be some things Jones throws in there just that are always going to catch people off guard. The stepping elbows that he used against Rashad Evans, the oblique kick, the chasse kick, which is devastating to the thighs and the knees. I expect those to be things that Rosenstrike might be troubled with if he fought Jon Jones. But still, he's got the experience and he's got the ability, the counter-punching ability to really punish Jon Jones if he makes mistakes. We've seen Jon Jones get clipped. We've seen him get hurt. We've now seen him get taken down as well. All of these guys, these heavyweights, they're going to look at Jon Jones as fresh meat in the division and a big name to prove themselves. Rosenstrike's got nothing to lose going into that fight with Jones, and I think he's got the striking pedigree to cause him issues. He loses that fight on the ground against Jon Jones. Jones takes him down and mauls him on the floor and subs him. And that's the reason why Rosenstrike's not going to get this fight. And it goes the same for Derek Lewis as well. He's the next one down. We know Lewis can hit you with a cannonball right into the last round. I just feel like we saw the holes in his game against DC, and I feel like Jones could do the same thing again, but just meaner. Open him up with elbows, punish his body knowing full well that he gets hurt to the body and he shows that pain. I just don't think Derek Lewis is a great fight for... Derek Lewis is not a tough enough challenge for Jon Jones. See, as soon as we move out of the top sort of 3 or 4, I start to lose interest in these fights for Jon Jones. I mean, I'm moving down the rankings now. The next one down is Overeem. That is absolutely a fight I would like to see, just purely because of the pedigree and experience on Overeem's part. I still would expect Jon Jones to have his number. I would expect Jon Jones to be able to keep a pace on him that Overeem gets quite uncomfortable with. But you know how tricky Overeem is. You know what his footwork's like. He does kind of back up and he does awkward things and he does draw you in when you don't really want to strike, and then he'll take your head off with something you're not expecting. He's also very good at manipulating the upper body as well in the clinch to pull people's heads towards knees. I don't know whether Overeem's got the tenacity at this point in his career to really deal with someone like Jon Jones. And then as we're going down, again, I don't want to see really any of these fights until we get lower down, but JDS, Volkov, Sakai, Harris, Abdurakhimov, Olenek could be a fascinating one because of how many fights he's got, but I think Jon Jones would run through him. And then, as we move down the division, it just gets easier and easier, I feel, for Jon Jones. There are a few guys that stand out. I mean, Cyril Gann's at number 14 in the division. He's 6-0. Obviously, he's very green in his MMA career. But he's got the movement and the athleticism and the striking skill to be problematic for Jones. I think he could do with some more experience before that opportunity is presented, but certainly someone we need to keep an eye on. And not someone that's necessarily gifted with knockout power, but has all of the skills to make his strikes count. And we've also seen him with submissions in the UFC as well. So who knows what this guy's got in the back pocket. I've got a few others on my list as well. Now, Verdum's, I believe, out of his contract now. But with his win over Gustafsson, I can always put Verdum in a heavyweight fight and see how he deals. He's a very intelligent and wily individual. He knows how to play tricks, and he's very good at gamesmanship. I mean, you saw in the Ankalaev Kutalaba video him playing possum and pretending to get knocked down. I think. I was very surprised how he did against Gustafsson. I was very surprised with that armbar. And I just can't count Verdum out against any of these heavyweights because he's always there to surprise me and throw something out there that I would expect from a younger, fresher fighter. Whether Verdum's going to be around in the UFC, I'm not sure, but I do think his contract's come to an end, so we'll keep that one in mind. And I mentioned Gustafsson again. I know he stepped up to heavyweight, same as OSP. He's also on my list. I don't know whether Gustafsson Jones would be any different at heavyweight, but I would certainly watch it. I think Gustafsson's just a bit stuck at the moment. I think he's not exactly sure where he belongs. I don't think he feels very comfortable at heavyweight, and I think he really thought he was going to beat Verdum quite comfortably and put himself in a position for some bigger fights. We might now see Gustafsson return to the light heavyweight division, especially now we've got a vacancy of a champion. I could certainly see Gustafsson stepping in there and taking out some of these other light heavyweight contenders. So maybe he's off the table, but another one we could keep an eye on. And then the last one I'll throw out there is Stefan Struve. The reason I think this one's interesting is because he's the only person in the division that can rival the reach of Jon Jones. The difference, obviously, is Stefan Struve's quite a decent bit taller than Jon Jones, but interesting challenges for Jon Jones to overcome. One of the reasons why I always liked the old Pride events and the old Japanese MMA is because they would throw guys together that were just an odd matchup, just odd fights to see how one guy used his martial arts skill to overcome another. I watched Royce Gracie against Akebono the other day. Royce Gracie's giving up 10,000 pounds in weight or something, and comes out with no gi top on, and what's he gonna do? All this. I love those weird matchups, and I think that Jon Jones moving up to heavyweight, there are a few of those odd matchups that I think could be quite interesting. If we're focusing on the main ones, we've got Stipe, obviously, is the main one. Ngannou, I believe, is the toughest test for him in the division. Blades, I would very much like to see Jones tested by someone like Blades. And then the other one is Rosenstrike, who I just think he's a little early in his career right now, but certainly may have the striking pedigree to catch Jon Jones on the way in. The one thing I will say about Ngannou, and this is the reason why I feel like he's my top pick still for Jon Jones, is because of the speed of his work. Jon Jones is excellent at dragging fights out, making people look bad, frustrating them over the distance and then starting to pick them apart, not taking any risks, fighting out of a good defense. Ngannou negates all of that with the power that he's got in his hands. I did a little bit of maths earlier. So we've got 20 seconds against Rosenstrike, 111 against JDS, 26 seconds against Kane, and 45 seconds against Blades. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's 2 minutes, 42 seconds for four of the best heavyweights in the world. Two former champions and two guys that have got the potential to be champion in the future. That's less than a round. That's just over half a round to beat four top flight heavyweights. He also has first round wins over Overeem and Arlovsky, and we remember those fights as well. He's a dangerous individual. So he's the guy for Jon Jones to avoid if he steps up to heavyweight. Stipe's the right one for him to get, because I think that's his easiest route to the title, obviously with Stipe having the title, but I also think it's probably the easiest fight for him in the top 3 or 4 at this point in the division. No offense to Stipe meant in any way. I just think stylistically, I think Blades having such a strong wrestling offensive and being so strong and powerful with good ground and pound, and Ngannou being basically a walking nuclear weapon. I think they're the 2 roughest tests for Jon Jones at heavyweight, but nevertheless, excellent fights. Anyway, put your thoughts in the comments below. I'm interested to see who you would like to see, and give me a top 3 of who you'd like to see Jon Jones face in the heavyweight division, and we'll see you next time.